Did my damn computer freeze?
No, I'm still here. I'm waiting for it to. It's loading.
Oh, because it says we're live on this end, and everybody, their
Okay.
cameras on the bottom are frozen.
Okay. Yeah. I believe we are live. It's actually playing an ad on on the other screen. So I'm guessing anyone watching right now is seeing the ad and they're about to see us. But okay. All right. There we go. Looks like if any of that other stuff wasn't on before, we are now. All right. We are live. Hello, everyone. This is my 2 cents, and this is my April patrons live stream. Now I'm joined by two of my patrons, Christian and Jacob. I also have my friend Esoteric Entity here, and we're just going to have a chat about whatever either they want to talk about, or for anyone watching, if you have anything you want to talk about, go ahead, post a comment in the chat, and we'll see if we can address that. Otherwise, I will. If no one else has anything they want to talk about, usually I just resort to reading through recent comment fails and letting the conversation go from there. So I see, looking at the chat here, I see got Conservative Californian, Jamil Isifu, and Armin Wood. Hello, everyone. And I think a total of 8 are watching. Oh, yes, and Boom Kid 3XD asks, do you guys like to draw? I don't know, but everybody, patrons and Esoteric, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Who goes first?
I guess Esoteric, you can go ahead and go first.
Hey everybody. I'm sure if you watch my 2 cents, or at least most of you know who I am, but if you don't, I'm basically in the same circle as my 2 cents. I make videos on economics occasionally, and it's an interest of mine. But I'm more interested in the legal framework and how an anarchist society would actually be structured.
Okay, Christian, if you want to say anything.
Well, I'm just an average guy. I'm a fan of my 2 cents, and I figured I'd put my money where my mouth is, and I'm a Patreon. So that's pretty much it about me.
All right. Thank you very much. Jacob?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way. Just an average guy who loves my 2 cents content, and I just hopped up on here after I finished some homework for classes and stuff.
All right. I see Jamil just said, I love your videos, 2 cents. Thank you very much. All right. Conservative Californian says, talk about North Korea. Well, did you have anything in specific besides, or perhaps you're referring to in the news how supposedly Kim Jong-un has agreed to denuclearize, at least to some extent? I
seriously doubt that they're going to do that. Because they have a whole plan laid out for what they're trying to do. They're trying to take over South Korea, and then they're going to attack Japan to try and take over Japan, and then they're going to attack the US. That's strategically what they're trying to do, and it's the only move for them that makes any sense. So I can't see a de-escalation with South Korea to be anything other than a manipulative ploy.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I think North Korea's strategy is, I mean, they know they would collapse were it not for the foreign aid that they receive. So pretty much if historically you can look, they go through a series where they make threats. Everyone tells them to back off. They say, we'll back off if you give us free stuff. The UN, the US, whoever it is, gives them more aid. They back off for a little bit, and then in a couple of years, the cycle repeats itself.
Well, here's the deal with North Korea that everybody seems to be neglecting is the fact that, you know, their population, their rations are running low. They're sort of running out of what they can keep available to them. And, you know, the North Koreans don't seem to care. They seem to have a very utilitarian view of their population. Like, they have entire provinces that they're basically just letting starve. And we don't know that. We can just assume that because they don't let the UN see those provinces. But my point is that if their population declines to such a point, then they're not going to be able to have an active enlisted military participation. So basically, the more their population starves, the less military power they have. So if they're going to make a move, they're going to do it pretty soon.
All right.
Well, my thought on this week's developments is that I think they're just pandering. Personally, I think that the leader of Korea is scared of Trump. And I don't know their agenda, to be honest with you, but I think that they're getting rid of a nuclear test site. Well, they don't need nuclear test site. They need ICBM test site. So they're just pandering and just giving away stuff that they don't need. My thought is, sure, they're just trying to gain time now or trying to show face or trying to look good in front of national the world community until that meeting with Donald Trump. Because like I said, nobody has ever asked to be meeting with the president, and I think they're just pandering. That's just my thought about Korea.
Yeah, I'm mostly in the same boat with that because. Sorry,
go ahead.
I'm just in the same boat as basically what you guys say. I think they're just pandering right now, just kind of like get them heat off of them, especially after a lot of recent like missile tests. But yeah.
And it's been said too, like one of the greatest threats to North Korea would be the North Korean people if they ever had it in them to stage a revolution. So, ever since what Kim Jong-un is the current leader, his father Kim Jong-un, and I think it was like Kim Jong-sil or something was his father. Ever since he came to power, Kim Il-sung. Like the whole thing they have is they need the North Korean people to believe that the leader of North Korea is literally a god. They publish all kinds of propaganda where they say, whenever he golfs, he scores 18. He can jump over mountains and a bunch of other ridiculous stuff, but it's pounded into the children's heads from the time they're kids.
He doesn't need to go to the washroom. He's beyond that.
Yes.
So, but like I said, I think it's just pandering. And there was documented facts, reported facts that some of the envoys from North Korea will walk around Washington's asking Democrats and conservatives, hey, what do you think that Donald Trump means about this? What do you think he means about this? I think they're just scared. They're pandering. Like I said, I don't know what their agenda is, but I think they're just trying to gain time until they move more forward and maybe into their nuclear program or until they think they might find the upper hand somewhere over this.
Well, North Korea is in a position where they, again, as I outlined earlier, they don't actually have much. They don't have many resources. They don't have a very strong population. So essentially, their only move, as of right now, is to try and take over South Korea with what little they have. And they're not going to do it with military might. They're going to try and do it slyly. So this is the kind of thing I'd look out for if I were somebody spectating, because if they take over South Korea, that would basically put them back on the map, because they'd be able to take all of South Korea's resources and all of their people. And plus, South Korea is an active nuclear power. They have a lot of nukes in South Korea. So...
But to be honest with you, I don't think they could take them on single-handedly. They'd have to ask Big Brother China to help them out. And I don't think China is willing to go that direction to bring the wrath of the U.S. on them and a nuclear war. So yes, the ideal originally is to unify the Koreas, but I don't think they have the power or the need. They have the will, but I don't think they can actually do any of this. So hence, that's why they're pandering until they can move closer to ICBM delivery system That's just my thoughts. I don't know. Because to be honest with you, I think they painted themselves in a corner.
Mm-hmm. And as with on the issue of China, if I'm not mistaken, the official stance that the Chinese have taken is they said if the U.S. attacks North Korea first, they will come to North Korea's aid. If North Korea makes the first move, they will not come to North Korea's aid.
That's right. So they say, yes, and I agree with that. I agree with that. If Korea does, North Korea does preemptive strikes, China will not defend them. But there's also this tyrant in Washington, and I use tyrant in quotation, willing to put tariffs on steel from China. And to be honest with you, I don't think China can have an economic war with the U.S. They wouldn't last too long because more or less their economy is just propped up. So they don't want the wrath of the U.S. going against them either. So they're walking a fine line too, I think.
Well, tariffs are stupid. I mean, for one thing, they don't actually all they do is keep resources out of the US or make them ridiculously expensive. And all that does is it doesn't stop China from trading with other countries.
No, granted, but when let's just say when the U.S. is your biggest competitor or your biggest customer, and the U.S. decides to put tariffs on it, more or less what I'm saying is, like, I'm just using tariffs as an example, but what I'm just saying is that if the U.S. decides to go into an economic war with China, China couldn't last too long. I don't think they have the resource. I think that their economy and their resource and all that is just propped up. Do you understand what I'm saying by that?
Yeah, for the most part, you're right. But China has did something recently, which I've been talking about lately, and that's releasing the petro yuan to compete with the U.S. on the gas market. So I would not say that China is going to lose that war. In fact, I think it's actually the contrary. Because of that, they just killed the U.S. dollar, or they just gave the U.S. dollar its due date because because the petro yuan, the gold-backed currency that they released, they're going to be trading for gas. That's the only thing holding up the U.S. dollar right now is its demand on the petro market.
Right.
Because you're familiar with the Federal Reserve and how there's basically an infinite supply of dollars. Well, that's the reason that the value has been relatively, I wouldn't say stable, but I'd say like in the safe area, is because it has a propped up demand on the petro market. But the petro yuan just got released recently, and that's going to completely take away all the demand from the petrodollar because it's a gold-backed currency, which means it's inherently more valuable.
Now I got a question for you because you're more economically inclined than I am. What do you think about the U.S. being finally, sorry, I'm a French guy, so I'm trying to think of the English word, energy dependent, self-dependent. They don't need to import from Saudi Arabia. Thanks to all the fracking, thanks to the coal, thanks to the oil and everything, they're self-reliant. Do you think that might have a thing that might be like they might not have to depend so much on foreign oil and the petrodollar?
Well, our population at home, I'm not necessarily too familiar with that, but if that's the case, that doesn't mean that the US dollar doesn't need to rely on foreign markets. All it means is that we don't need to rely on foreign markets for our gas.
Right. Okay.
But I know as a matter of fact that the U.S. Is heavily relying on foreign markets for the value of the U.S. dollar because like I'm sure you're familiar with what's happening in Syria right now. That's the reason we airstriked Syria. It's not because Assad gassed his citizens. We know they didn't.
No, they didn't. Actually, I think it was a mock. It was a mock gassing.
Okay, well, regardless,
Okay.
the thing that Syria has that the U.S. wants is the world's largest gas pipeline.
Yes, that would go from Russia through Syria.
Yeah, no, it starts in Iran, it goes through Iraq, and it goes to Syria, which coincidentally enough, Iran and Iraq are countries we attacked in the last decade, but that's another topic for another time.
Right.
But the reason we're attacking Syria is because...
I will say quickly.
Well, the
Go
reason...
ahead, finish esoteric, and then I'll add what I had to say.
The reason that we're attacking Syria is because... well, that's the largest exporter of gas, but Syria, they're not one of our allies, but they're allies to both Russia and China.
And in Iran, yes.
Right. So in a trade deal, they're going to have heavy favoritism towards Russia and China. And the U.S. knows that because China just released the Petro Yuan, they need to hit China as hard as they possibly can to just basically delay the inevitable, because they know that the Petro Yuan, much like our gold standard, it's unsustainable. And the reason why is because when you have a fiat system, when you have a sort of central banking economy, you can only have so much investment. You can only have so much spending before you need to artificially raise credit levels, which is the reason that all countries eventually go on reserve notes, because a gold standard is fundamentally unsustainable for that reason. You're going to need more credit than what a gold supply can offer.
Right.
So the U.S. thinks that if we harm China as much as possible, if we put as much trouble on their oil trade as possible, that they're gonna need to back off the Petro Yuan.
Okay.
Which what's interesting, and I'd like to bring up is, one thing that is not often talked about is that prior to the invasion of Iraq, Saddam Hussein was, I don't remember specifically if it was, I think it was the euro, but he was planning on trading oil in euros. And shortly thereafter, the U.S. invaded Iraq. Yes. Then Gaddafi in Libya had announced his intentions to begin trading oil with a gold-backed currency, and shortly thereafter, Gaddafi was taken out.
That's right. Yeah, because the war, a lot of people might think, well, a lot of people say the war in Iraq was about getting the oil. It was never about getting the oil. It was about getting out Saddam Hussein because, like you said, he wanted to get back from trading oil from the American currency to the euro. So as soon as he did that, everybody moved in. And same thing with Gaddafi. So you're right about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember those wars too. I in case you guys haven't figured it out, I'm a little older than all of you. I could actually be as old as both of you put together. So there you go.
Oh no, I remember the Iraq War as well, and yeah, I grew up in at that time, at least, I was living in a very left-wing household, so that was always the impression that I got, is that it was over oil. But at that time, I was like 6 or 7, so
yeah. Actually, just to show you how old I am, I remember the Gulf War. I was your age when the Gulf War came out, so yeah, I could be your dad and then some. But anyway, doesn't mean anything. I haven't heard from Jacob. How come you're so quiet?
I'm just quiet, Des. I'm not too familiar with like all the stuff in Syria right now. I've heard some stuff from my dad who works for the Navy, but that's all I've heard.
Cool. And just so I say, just so you know, I'm a foreign national. I'm actually a Canadian. I'm not an American.
Oh, you are?
Yes. Oh, that's why I speak French.
Oh, wait, Quebec. I'm just guessing Quebec.
Well, that's a good guess, but not really. I'm one of those black sheeps. I'm one of those French guys that lives in Ontario. I'm from the nation's capital.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
I'm like To do an analogy, I'm like a Puerto Rican who lives in Cleveland, Ohio, not in New York.
Yeah, I got family. I got family who came from Quebec and stuff.
Well, to be honest with you, in Quebec, there's 7 million francophones, and it's the heartland. But the truth of the matter is, francophonie in Canada is spread across the board. There's 7 millions in Quebec. There's 800,000 in the Maritimes, or maybe about 1 million in the Maritimes. There's about 2 millions in Ontario, 500,000 in Manitoba and the prairies, or what you Americans would call the Midwest. So we're pretty much all over the place. Everything is focused in Quebec. But anyway, let's not make it about me. What about
if we could? There were a couple of questions in the chat. There's one really good one here from Mag Giannini. She asks, what holds gold with value? Gold is just a rock. It's not a tool or helps in anything like copper, but copper is cheap. I know gold is hard to get, but why or makes gold have its value? It's a rock.
It's a preferred medium of exchange that has a lot of fungibility, durability, and it's interchangeable. It's a very abundant commodity. Mm-hmm. So what holds its value is simply that there's a lot of utility out of it. And the reason it's more valuable than something like steel or iron is also because of its added commodity as being a power source.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, really good question. And Esoteric pretty much summed it up. I would say if you want to really get into the fine details of it, I recommend there's a channel, type in Mike Maloney in the YouTube search bar. He has a channel called Gold and Silver, and he has a couple video series called Hidden Secrets of Money that explains really well. But like Esoteric said, the reason gold continually is selected as money by the free market is because it is a medium of exchange. It's portable, fungible, divisible, and resistant to counterfeiting, all of which make it ideal, should be used as money. All right. Conservative Californian asks, should we end the Fed? My answer to that is a resounding yes.
Why is he even asking me that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Being a foreign national, I reserve no comments.
Okay. Should we end the Fed is something we could talk about for hours, but if I had to sum it up, pretty much what most people don't understand, and I think if more people did, we'd probably be closer to ending the Fed. But the Fed, to sum up what the Fed does, it creates money out of nothing and then expects you to pay it back with interest. But because they're the only ones that create money, the simplest analogy is pretty much if there was only $1 in existence, if you borrow that dollar with a promise to pay it back with interest, there's no other dollars to pay it back. So you have to borrow more money to pay back the previous loan, which in turn only creates more debt. So you would have to borrow more money to pay that debt back. And if there was only one bank and one person in the world, it would be very easy to see that this is unsustainable. It's when you've got millions of people, it's not as easy to detect, but it's nonetheless true. Because of the way the Fed and the current banking system works, it guarantees that there's always more debt than there is money, and therefore the system is unsustainable.
Specifically, what the Fed does is it gets requested to make money by some of these smaller banks like Goldman Sachs, for example. Then it commissions the Treasury Department to create reserve notes, and to pay for the reserve notes, the Treasury Department taxes people on interest. So essentially, it's just a never-ending cycle where they never actually get paid back.
Mm-hmm. But it basically pretty much guaranteed. And what, like I said, for those that are interested, I highly recommend Mike Maloney's series, Hidden Secrets of Money. But what's interesting is he and his team of scholars basically looked into it. They looked at every fiat currency in history that's ever been used, and there is a 100% failure rate. Some last longer than others, but the bottom line is all fiat currencies sooner or later eventually hyperinflate and become worthless.
And that's the problem a lot of these Ron Paul Republic types don't realize. That the so-called minarchists is something that I've been pointing out for a while here. And again, I don't know if I'm the one to find this or if somebody else made a similar observation, but that states need to go on fiat essentially because they have a growing population and everybody uses their services. Eventually, there's not going to be enough to actually pay for their services, so they need to find ways to artificially expand their credit.
Mm-hmm. In particular, and I would say historically, war is often the reason that that they end up hyperinflating. Weimar, obviously Germany post World War I and the Weimar Republic is a perfect example. But the United States, ever since World War I, which was shortly after the creation of the Fed, has proven that prior to that war will inevitably creates a great deal of debt, which the banking system loves debt because it ensures that they get more money. So,
yeah, and in the U.S., I think honestly, I think with after what they're doing in Syria, if they don't start a war, then they're done because yeah, the petro yen is going to completely kill the U.S. dollar. They're not going to, as I mentioned, even if they do go to war and try and cut Syria off, they're just going to delay the inevitable because Syria is not the only exporter of gas; it's just the main one. And that wouldn't ensure that the U.S. has control over it. It would just make that a contested area, which would effectively mean that nobody gets it.
But wait, I'm just curious. Why do you have so much faith in this petro yen? What gives you, like, sure, it's gold based and all that, gold back, but what do you think everybody's going to buy into that, the petro yen?
Well, because it's gold backed and the US dollar on the international market is the main trader in gold, not gold, I mean, fucking oil. And yeah, if you get an actually valuable currency that's not being propped up because it's being traded for oil, then yeah, people are going to start trading with yen because it's an actually valuable medium of exchange. It's
now, yeah, okay. So what's your thought about the IMF?
I think that they're a crony organization, and I'm not very fond of them.
I second that.
No, that's fine. But do you think they have any power to maybe yield the petro yen?
Seriously doubt it because because that's not really how the market works. People still have demand for something regardless of if a government or an international entity intervenes and says, no, you shouldn't trade with that. They're like, well, I want to, and I'm going to because I want to.
Yeah, in my opinion, they can possibly delay it. They can't stop it.
Okay, got you. Delay is about the only power they have.
Yes, and I mean, if you think about it, that's all. Ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve, ever since we went to a completely debt-backed currency, all we've been doing is delayed. Because the system works such that there's always more debt than there is money, it has been inevitable that it will collapse. Every politician wants to make sure it doesn't collapse on their watch. They keep trying to kick the can down the road. Maybe it'll happen sooner, maybe it'll happen later, depending on the action that the bankers and the politicians working together take, but it will happen.
It doesn't matter if it's Trump. I'm pretty sure it's not going to last another decade. I mean, that's what I've been saying. Yeah, that's what I've been saying for a few months now is just the point that we're at, not only with the petro yen, but the emerging just scale of the crypto market could also kill the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you think? Sorry to cut you off. Do you think that the petro yen might even affect Russia's exports of gas and stuff like that into Europe?
I think that it could have an effect, but it's not going to have as much of an effect on Russia as it is the U.S. because Russia's currency is not dominating the global oil market right now, and Russia's currency is not currently being propped up specifically because of the oil market.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they trade most of their gas to Eastern Europe. But I don't think it's going to hit them as hard as it'll hit us because
Gotcha. Now, do you foresee a recession or maybe even, God forbid, a depression?
I definitely do.
it's
Oh, really?
yeah, if we're specifically going on the US dollar, then yeah, I see a really bad one, like Hershey's dollars costing thousands of dollars kind of recession. But the thing is, though, is we have, again, I briefly touched upon it, but we have this crypto market that is a pretty solid commodity that has it's not affected by fiat. So what I think will happen personally is once the U.S. dollar starts to decline, a lot of people will put their assets in gold, silver, and crypto. And because
Right.
so many people will put their assets in crypto, that'll stabilize the market, and then crypto will become a preferred medium of exchange, and then that'll essentially kickstart the rise of the counter economy and lead to the eventual stateless society.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth noting that high-profile bankers have gone on TV voicing their desire to make cryptos illegal, and I mean that's significant. Bankers don't usually like to be on TV, period. But the fact that they do that shows they're threatened by it.
Well, they're threatened by it because they can't control it. That's the main issue. They can't control it. Anything they can't control, they can't make money off of, and it's a threat to their livelihood.
Exactly.
Well, it's a threat to their livelihood because it threatens the state. Because it's inherently decentralized, it means that the state can't control it. And if it's going to overtake the fiat market, then, the state can't do anything. The state is essentially going to become, it's going to split society into two sections. It's going to create the state society, the society, faction controlled by the state, and it's going to create this giant counter market. And the counter market's easily going to win that one because the because everyone in the private sector is going to go towards the counter market since it's more profitable for them to trade in the counter market. And then the state's not going to have a private sector, so then they're not going to be able to fund anything they do.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, that's like with a lot of kids like in my area right now. I was talking with one of my friends from work, and he was basically saying like how he's basically on the train of like how that like crypto's like Bitcoin's just gonna die in a few months, and he's just gonna hop on, get some money, then hop back off. But I'd honestly be surprised if anyone around me knew how valuable crypto would be in the future.
Well, they've been saying Bitcoin. It's been how long now since they keep saying Bitcoin is going to die? It's going to die.
Oh, they've been saying it since Bitcoin came out.
Mm-hmm. Has it been a bit of a roller coaster? Yes, but it's certainly not dead, and it ain't going anywhere.
Well, it hasn't been a stable market. That's the problem. In order for the market to stabilize, it has to have a large and consistent network of people exchanging with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I believe we have an Aussie who just joined us.
I'm going to go get some water. I'll be right back.
Welcome. Pipsqueak, you there?
I'm here. Apologies, I'm late. I'm confirming the lazy Australian stereotype because I slept in.
So what's the chat saying, 2 cents?
Okay, taking a look here, I see here are a couple of comments. If we go into a recession, how long will it take to get out of it, and how far will we fall? I'll be honest, that is a really good question, and no one is entirely sure because an economic collapse of that magnitude has never been seen before, even the Great Depression.
Personally, I think this is it. I think that the U.S. dollar is not going to survive this one.
I would say so as well. But yeah, the U.S. dollar won't survive. If the U.S. dollar won't survive, where will that leave the government? Difficult to say.
Well, that's the thing here is that this time we have economic decentralization, which if such a thing existed during the Great Depression, then I'm almost positive that we would have had a stateless society form after that as well.
Mm-hmm. The next comment was, what makes cryptocurrencies stable? Also, can cryptocurrencies be tracked in any way?
Well, no, and I already sort of answered what makes them stable.
Yes. So what makes them unstable right now is the fact that it's not the majority of the world still hasn't bought into it yet. But can it be tracked? No, and that's one of the major reasons the bankers hate it.
I mean, Russia and China, they both already outlawed it, and it didn't do anything to their market. People were just like, "Oh no, wait a minute. This is decentralized. They can't be tracked. They can't track it. What are they going to do?"
Mm-hmm. All right, next question. The banks have been a part of government since its emplacement. With things like Bitcoin, will banks fail? Well, yep. I'm actually going to have to correct that. Banks have not been a part of the government the way people think they have. Just to use U.S. history as an example, there was at the inception of the United States, there was a huge argument about whether or not we needed a central bank. Hamilton leading the charge that we did, and Jefferson leading the charge that we didn't. There was a first national bank for a short period of time. Later, there was a second national bank that was famously killed by Andrew Jackson. And between the time that Jackson stopped the bank and the Federal Reserve, there was no central bank, and the economy worked just fine.
Yeah. If you're going to talk about like smaller banks, that's sort of what I thought at first. But no, that central banks have not existed as long as states have existed. States have been around for 5,500 years. Yeah, they've been around since about ancient Mesopotamia. And central banking's only existed for like 1,000 years. So.
Mm-hmm. As for will banks fail, the answer is yes. Many of the banks we have will fail. Does it mean banks will cease to exist? No, but they will look a lot different than they do now.
Well, many banks are being propped up by the state, so it's going to be a major upset in the market.
Well, it's certainly no one's arguing that.
Yeah, it will. And I'm not arguing that either. I think banks are probably just that market in general is one of the worst examples of cronyism. I don't think there's a single bank that is not subsidized by the government
at this point. And I think what's so devious about all of it is that the average American, or not even American, the average citizen in the world doesn't understand how banks work. I mean, if you were walking down the street and asked someone, "Do you know what fractional reserve banking is?" One in 1,000 might know.
Most people think that I mean, I get this one a lot, and it makes me cringe every time I hear it because of how common it is and how fucking wrong it is. But people tell me all the time when I start talking about currency that currency's value is based on what we agree it's based on. God, I hate that so much. Don't you guys hate that?
And the reason they say it is because that's like, I remember being taught that in 6th grade. Like, people are literally being taught that in school.
Yeah, if that was the case, you'd never be able to predict market fluctuations. The market would never crash because everyone would just say, "No, we're not going to let the market crash."
Okay. Next comment comes from Simon Petrikov. If the US dollar collapse, what percentage of people would go into cryptocurrency? I guess it's difficult to say an exact percentage, although I'm inclined to think it'd be
a lot of them would.
A lot, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll just throw a number out there: 80% or more.
Because that's what they'd look at. They wouldn't care about the previous stigma that Bitcoin had. They'd see, hey, this isn't being affected by the market crash, so this is a stable asset.
Mm-hmm. And I think if just to use like Weimar Germany as an example, obviously there wasn't cryptocurrency by that time, but when the Weimar Republic went through their hyperinflation, what people started doing was just the moment they got their hands on any currency, they bought whatever they could, preferably something that would not like food or something that would spoil, but they would just buy any kind of hard asset they could because they knew if they hung on to their currency, it would lose value. But I think whereas Weimar Republic, they weren't. I mean, technology's come a long way now. With the crypto market, with precious metals, there'd be a lot. What am I looking for here? It'd be a lot more obvious what to invest in. Esoteric, did you have something to add?
I did, but I forgot. God damn it.
Okay, no problem. All right. The next question was, will organized religion die during the Mega Depression? I'm gonna say no. I don't think so. In fact, during a Mega Depression like that, during times of crisis, many people are more inclined to turn to religion. So
yeah. Because people become desperate, and that's generally when religions thrive. That's why religions play on like recovery things or just instances where people are very vulnerable and desperate.
Depends on the religion, though.
That's true. It does depend on the religion, but
like what was it? Like. During times of hardship previously in Europe, when religions are being persecuted from one group to another, in particular, Christians who believe in the rapture, whenever times get really, really hard, the belief in that particular part of Christianity drops rapidly, because it's like, oh, we were supposed to have the rapture before all the bad times came. It's like drops rapidly. But,
if you're talking about
in the rapture.
If you're talking about the Abrahamic faiths, then yeah, I think that the Abrahamic faiths will see a surge as a result. But do I think that all of them will? I don't know. Maybe not Buddhism or some of the more obscure ones.
Well, I don't believe the Islamic faith will go up because everything is pre-dawned. I believe if you look at the Dark Ages, when the Black Plague was going through Europe, Christianity went down because we were more or less, people were saying, hey, we're dying, we need our savior, and the church couldn't do anything about it. So therefore, I don't think that, I'm sure people will run to religion, but I don't think they'll get what they expect. If that makes any sense.
All right. The next question is, in your opinion, who is the most annoying gun control advocate? Boy, that is tough. However, I'm going to say, I'm going to recommend one of Esoteric's recent videos. He made, Esoteric, what was that guy called? The one with the cartoon lady?
Oh. The birds and the BS. I don't remember that dude's name though.
Mr. Jordan, I think it was.
I first discovered his channel because Esoteric made that response, and I've been checking up on him to see if there's anything worth debunking. But he he brought in some kind of on his channel. He brings in guest stars, but he animates them. And in this particular video, he brought in some Broadway actress who sang her entire part about why guns are evil. And
his name is Jordan Roth, by the way.
Okay, that is definitely up there as far as most annoying gun control advocate.
Yeah, I'd say that that's definitely up there. I mean, that video, I was about as irritated making that video as I sounded like in the video. But no, I think David Hogg, he's if he's not the most annoying, he's a close second.
Oh, definitely there.
He's got that book coming out, and I'm planning on doing a book reading series on it when it comes out. Yeah, and it's gonna be all overplayed, and I'm gonna rip up the book at the end and shit.
But yeah, David Hogg is the most know-it-all little twerp ever, and especially the whole thing with Laura Ingraham. Like, it's on one hand, he's on camera saying, like, I know this stuff so much better than my quote old ass parents. They don't know how to use our democracy. I do. If I was running the show, like, none of this would never have happened. Yet the moment you criticize him, I'm just a little child who endured a hardship. You can't criticize me.
Yeah. No, but also back where I grew up, there's like this little like farm that's like there, and it got big media attention because like they're putting up signs like end racism now, like and all the other like major talking points about it. And one said Emma Gonzalez for president 2024.
Oh God!
I'm not joking. I am not joking, and I probably live about 5 minutes away from it.
Well, I wouldn't say Emma Gonzalez 2024. I'd say Stormy Daniels 2024.
Yes, make America horny again.
Yes.
Nobody 2024.
Well, some people were saying Kanye today. I was watching a video about that. Paul Joseph Watson. Kanye.
Yes. I saw it, and I guess the controversy with him, he tweeted out that he likes Candace Owens, and Twitter responded absolutely crazy.
But to be honest with you, I'm not sold on Candace Owens. I think she's an opportunist.
I do not trust Candace Owens either. And I have ever since Tree of Logic outed her. There's several. Like, honestly, I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but the problem is she was called out for social autopsy, and her response was that was just a splash page. The website was never functional. Well, Dave Cullen of Computing Forever and others demonstrated that no, it was not just a splash page. It was an operational website that for a year possessed the ability to upload a docs. Now, does that mean there was anyone who actually received the docs? We don't know. But the website worked and you could upload a docs. She also, when she put out social autopsy, she stated that her and her team had already gathered 22,000 profiles. What happened to those? And then when between Dave Cullen, Tree of Logic, No Bullshit, these are some pretty mainstream right-wing YouTubers who are calling her out. She doesn't respond to a single one of them. She instead claims that Richard Spencer is going after her. And all that Richard Spencer did was tweet out 2 videos, one by No Bullshit and one by Tree of Logic. So, I mean, she shows all the signs of a deceptive person. And for that reason, I have no reason to believe that she's really conservative.
No, yeah. And what did she do with that 22,000 docs of information? Did she delete them? No, she's keeping them in the cloud. I like you said, I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw her. I think she's an opportunist, and she's just going with where the wind blows. Everything's going towards conservative right now, so she left her SJW tendencies behind. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just say this: no one believes in exploiting beautiful women to get good ideas out there more than I do. If you've watched my videos, you certainly know that. But nonetheless, I cannot just blatantly trust her because people want to watch her. So,
well, you know what? She's picture perfect. She's black. She used to be SJW. She's a millennial. Like, she's perfect for the conservative blend or conservative brand. The only problem is she's a shyster,
Exactly.
in my opinion.
Yeah, no,
I agree. And what bothers me is the fact that the people who she goes after Richard Spencer for tweeting out videos, but the people who have actually documented the problems with her story, Dave Cullen, Tree of Logic, no bullshit. She just pretends like they don't exist.
Yeah, and those guys are heavy duties. They're heavy hitters.
Mm-hmm.
No, but even when she's confronted by someone like Blair White, like on the Dave Rubin show, like I watched that thing, and it was just her like throwing insult to try to like distract and stuff.
Exactly. She was trying to get her emotionally riled up, which unfortunately she succeeded.
Yeah.
But
it was just very unfortunate that Blair was drawn into this.
all right. Simon Petrikov asks, how will churches pay for things if the majority goes into cryptocurrency? Well, churches being primarily private institutions would pay with cryptocurrency. So
Yeah,
I guess I'm not sure where you're going with that question.
Well, first of all, they don't pay taxes, so they got a step ahead of everybody.
well, I mean, no shit, but I mean, I don't see, instead of holding that little dish out, they can just walk around with a phone and people give them cryptocurrency. I mean, I don't see how that wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we've been going for about an hour now. So if anybody has any extra thoughts, anyone in the chat, if you got any questions left, now's the time to push them. I don't have a time limit on this, but just usually roughly it goes for about an hour.
Oh yeah, there was a topic that I had in mind. And that's like have you noticed how hostile the left is? Like particularly the left anarchist crowd, the so-called left libertarians, are to the idea of a natural law existing.
Yes.
Oh, you know what's really funny about it is, unlike them, I've actually read Mikhail Bakunin, Peter Kropotkin, and Pierre Joseph Proudhon, and they all believe in a form of natural law. In fact, the only anarchists that don't are egoists, and even then, they do believe in a form of natural law. They just the idea of might makes right. They just think there's not really a law.
Mm-hmm. What's fun, I recently made a video responding to Tovershev Endymion. He made a video called The Strange Concept of Ownership, in which he argued that ownership does not exist. It is merely what those that run society say it is. And I pointed out in the video, if that's the case, then you have no grounds to argue for Marxism. Because Marx claimed that, well, I mean, one of the central tenets of Marxism is that the capitalist class is extracting surplus value from the labor workers, and that value rightfully belongs to the labor workers. But if by your own admission, and let's assume for a second that Marx was right, well, he can't both be right about the workers being entitled to that so-called surplus value if ownership is an incoherent concept and doesn't exist.
Yeah, ownership in Marxism is one of the most wildly varying things that I've seen out of any school of philosophy. And yeah, it doesn't even, yeah, that's the inherent inconsistency with the belief in Marxism. But then there's also the idea of they believe in personal versus private property, but then they think that
no two Marxists can give the same definition as to exactly what constitutes the difference.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with Marxism that I was gonna get to, is they call their ideology a science, which it's not, but no two Marxists can agree on the same thing. They don't even understand, like they don't even have the same idea of what the first stage in their historical dialectics are.
Mm-hmm. And I would say the big, if I had to sum up the biggest problem with Marxism, it's that virtually all of it is tied together by the labor theory of value. So if you can prove the labor theory of value wrong, which you can very easily, then all of Marxism collapses.
Well, no, I'd say that's a problem with it, but there are schools of actual economics that believe in that as well, such as the neoclassicals, and just as an example. No, the biggest problem with Marx is Hegel. That's the biggest problem with Marx, and that's the main reason why his so-called scientific socialism is not scientific. Um, because if you actually read Marx's idea of late stage capitalism, he's basically describing economic problems that are created by the state, such as no businesses being able to pay for workers because the cost of wages have gone up so much. That's created by minimum wage laws.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it comes off like. It's more of a self-fulfilling prophecy than it is a scientific observation. These far left agitators infiltrate the government, then they make these things happen, then they point to these things and say, oh, look, it's late stage capitalism, just like Marx said it was, even though they caused it and it was caused entirely by them. It wasn't the market. And then they use that to try and create socialism.
Mm-hmm. I forget who the quote is, but isn't there's a famous quote of someone said, "The government breaks your leg, hands you a crutch, and then says, see, look what you would do. What would you do without the government?"
Yeah, I don't remember who said that. Let me look that up though, real quick.
Okay, we did get another question. Scorch88 says, how will murder investigation work and who would fund them? I assume you're asking, in an ANCAP society, how would murder investigation work? Well, to answer, how would it work? The same way it works now. I mean, the method by which you conduct murder investigation would not change. What would be different is that your police force would be privately funded, not publicly funded. And so...
Yeah, that was a quote by Harry Brown, by the way.
Okay.
But no, I don't even know why people ask these questions. Oh, how would it work without the government? Same way that it works now, just better because it's done by a private company instead of the government or a private individual.
The thing is that the police's function is an investigative one. What they're supposed to do is basically investigate crimes that have been committed and then prosecute someone. We already have private investigators.
Oh yeah, that's another.
That's the hilarious thing is like we already have a replacement for the police.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that private investigators, you could just see that. I mean, they solve pretty much anything. And as for the police, you know, that's something people don't even realize about the government is that the police are supposed to be the government's investigative branch. Yeah, this militarized thing is supposed to be the government's equivalent of a private investigating firm.
Mm-hmm.
What was that? Yeah, what was that Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court basically said no, the police don't have any duty to protect individual citizens?
Oh, there's quite a few of them. Deshaun versus Winnebago County. I'm trying to think of the one in New York, but there was one in New York. There's been quite a few of them. You could just look it up. They're pretty easy to find.
Like the police are there to protect you. No, that's not what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like Do you go in my Discord at all, my 2 cents, and you saw that debate I was having with that guy over natural law? He was trying to tell me that natural law is a social contract because you're forced into it.
Okay, I read some of it. I didn't get through all of that, but
Oh God. I got to make a video on natural law because yeah, a lot of people are not understanding it.
I would say natural law is probably one of the most misunderstood topics out there.
Well, that's the main misunderstanding that I want to make is a lot of people think that it's a legal system. No, it's not a legal system. It's sort of the legal equivalent of, you know, what a laissez-faire economy would be. It's not an economic policy. It's more the lack of one. It's what you're left with just the logic and the science behind reasoning.
All right, Scorch88, thank you for the super chat. Do you think duels would be legal if both parties agreed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
I don't know why anyone would agree to that, but
I suppose.
Paintball guns at 20 paces.
Yes. I'm trying to think, when was... I mean, everyone always... The duel everyone in American history always talks about is Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. I can't think if there's any duels that take place... Like, well, I mean, I'm sure there were duels that took place after that, but any ones that were particularly notable.
I don't even know why they focus on Alexander Hamilton because he died. That's dumb. They should look at Andrew Jackson's dueling history. He had like 300 duels by the time he died. He killed all of them.
Okay, I did not actually know that, but that's cool. All right, and I guess the dueling note is probably a good one to close off this stream. So thanks everybody for showing up. Esoteric, thanks for being here. To all my patrons, thank you so much for your continued support. And anyone watching, all it takes is $1 a month on Patreon or Maker Support, and you can participate in these. So I'll give everyone in the chat, if you or everyone in the stream, you want to give a quick shout out, and then we'll close this off.
Oh yeah, I'm Esoteric Entity. I got some pretty big videos coming out soon here. Sorry, my uploading has been slower than it usually is. Well, that's why. Also because I'm working. So. Okay.
Yes, and I'm guessing most people watching already know who Esoteric is, but if for some reason you don't, he actually had a much bigger channel. It was bigger than mine, but he was forced to start a new one due to YouTube censorship. So please help him get his subscribers back up. Pipsqueak, you got anything to say?
Not really.
All right, Christian.
No, not really, but thank you for letting me on tonight. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you guys so much for supporting my channel. And to everyone else watching, that is my 2 cents. So take it for what it's worth.